When you're younger, sometimes you feel pressure to maybe choose one side of yourself, one culture, one environment, one identity. But maturity teaches you that identity is layered. You can belong to multiple worlds at once. What it do, what it do. It's your boy Andre Spruell, and you're tuning in to Middle of the Fence podcast. And if you're watching the video portion, I do have the Argentina jersey for La Selección, so hopefully we repeat and run it back. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day, whether you're listening, watching, or both. As I like to say, time is the most valuable thing on this earth because we can spend it, but can't make it back. So as always, thank you for your time. And for this episode, this is a special edition because we have the World Cup happening this year. So let's get into it. Let's talk about something that sports sometimes reveals, but goes way deeper than sports itself. And some of those themes include identity, belonging, culture, and the feeling of being connected to something bigger than yourself. Because I think that's part of why events like the World Cup touch so many people emotionally. Because it's not just about winning games. It's about pride, family, heritage, representation, memory, and community. And for a lot of people, especially people who grew up between different cultures or environments, the World Cup becomes bigger than soccer or football, if you call it that. It becomes personal. For me, being both Black American and Argentinian has always created an interesting relationship with identity. Because growing up, there were moments where I felt connected to both sides of myself. But there were also moments where I felt like I was still trying to fully understand both sides too. And I think a lot of people who grow up between cultures understand that feeling. Because you love where you come from, right? But sometimes you also feel like you're still discovering parts of yourself in real time. And what I love most about sports is that they have a unique way of reconnecting people to their roots, especially soccer. I mean, after all, soccer is the world sport, right? It crosses languages, crosses social classes, it crosses religions, it crosses nationalities, especially through the World Cup. It crosses political beliefs, and for one moment, people from completely different walks of life become emotionally connected to the same exact thing. So the World Cup goes deep for a lot of people. You know, it can, like depending on the country that your family is from and all that. But for me personally, the World Cup is what really allowed me to connect to my Argentinian roots through sports. And I always grew up being a big time sports fan. I even wanted to be a sports anchor at one point, but got a little taste of an internship with that and realized, this ain't for me. But my earliest memory was the 2002 World Cup. I was 6 years old. And it was in Japan and Korea. So the games would come on at like 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Anywhere from like 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I remember Argentina had their very first group stage game at 3 a.m. And my grandfather, very Argentinian, God rest his soul, he was the person that woke us all up at 2 a.m., made sure we all had some kind of jersey or blue and white or baby blue and white on and supported the team. And from that moment, it made me realize even at a young age that, it goes much deeper than sports. This is rooted in heritage and family history. So, everyone resonates with it differently, and it doesn't necessarily have to be through the World Cup. But for me personally, this event is what allowed me to begin to connect to my roots, and especially with my Argentinian roots. One thing I noticed during the World Cup was how emotionally invested entire countries become. Soy argentino, y lo siento casi más que todo. Families gather together, flags come out, people cry, people celebrate with strangers, entire cities stop moving. And I think that reveals something important about human beings here, because people want to feel connected to something bigger than themselves. And research in psychology has actually shown that collective identity and group belonging play a major role in emotional well-being and self-esteem, topics which I've covered in previous episodes, so please be sure to check it out if you haven't. Because, again, humans naturally seek connection through community and shared identity. And honestly, I think national sports can amplify that feeling, because during moments like the World Cup, people temporarily stop viewing themselves only as individuals and start viewing themselves as part of something collective. And frankly, that's especially meaningful for immigrant families and multicultural households, because heritage sometimes becomes something emotional before it becomes something fully understood intellectually. Let me repeat that one more time. Sometimes heritage becomes emotional before it becomes fully intellectual. You feel connected to the music, the food, the traditions, the energy, the passion, before you can even fully explain why. And obviously, a huge part of this conversation for the World Cup has to be around Lionel Messi. Sorry to all the Ronaldo fans out there. Not really sorry, though. Because he became more than just an athlete. Messi became symbolic, not just for Argentinians, but honestly for perseverance in general. Because for years, people criticized him for never winning a World Cup despite his greatness. People questioned him. They compared him. They doubted him. And yet, he kept going. And I think a lot of people relate to that more than they even realize, right? Especially for people carrying pressure, whether it's pressure to succeed, pressure to represent their family, pressure to make their community proud, or even pressure to prove themselves. And I think one reason Messi's World Cup win became so emotional for people, especially for your boy, is because it represented delayed success. The idea that just because something doesn't happen immediately doesn't mean it's never coming. Messi, of course, the greatest of all time in my book. And, his perseverance was something that really stuck with me because, again, from following the national team from the time I was 6 years old, I saw all the finals that he lost. He lost in the 2014 World Cup final, lost in the Copa America, which is the South American version of like the World Cup, let's say. He lost that final in 2015, lost that final in 2016 with the Copa again, and he just kept coming up short and losing in the finals and always making it but never fully winning it. And then he won the Copa America in 2021 and then finally got that elusive World Cup win in 2022. And he was in his early 30s at that point and debuted for the national team as a teenager, at like 16 or 18 or something like that. It just goes to show that the perseverance of not giving up. And at one point, he even quit the national team because of how much it hurt him, but it just goes to show, like in life, that whatever you got going on, you can persevere and overcome. Someone like Messi can't even step outside of his house without people mobbing him, and has hundreds of millions of people, maybe even a billion people that saw his struggle firsthand and how long it took him to overcome. So whatever it is you're going through in life, take some time to think about that, right? You most likely don't have a large number of people, seeing what you have to persevere through and overcome, but it's just a great reminder in life that, no matter how long it takes, what's meant for you will ultimately find you when the time is right. And another thing I love about soccer or football specifically is how it exists across every socioeconomic level. You'll see kids playing soccer in wealthy neighborhoods and struggling neighborhoods, on beautiful fields, on concrete. That's how I played growing up. In streets, in dirt, practically anywhere. because the game itself is so simple. And there's honestly something really powerful about that. And research in sociology has even discussed how sports can strengthen social identity and create emotional unity across class divisions. And that's a big deal when you look at it from an international perspective. And the World Cup is one of the clearest examples of that happening globally. But I also think growing older changes how you view identity. Because when you're younger, sometimes you feel pressure to maybe choose one side of yourself, one culture, one environment, one identity. But maturity teaches you that identity is layered. You can belong to multiple worlds at once. And to be frank, growing up between different environments has probably given me, personally, more perspective than I realized at the time. Because now, I don't view being between worlds as confusion anymore like I once did. I view it as understanding. My favorite part of the World Cup, and you can tie in the Olympics as well, but embracing identities and different cultures. Again, you see everyone from different walks of life coming together for the same common cause to hope that their team wins it all or just thankful to even be in the tournament, right? And that's what this podcast is about at its core. You know, it's the importance of embracing identity, and regardless of your upbringing and what you had to go through, you know, it's all about being there to support one another. You know, just because someone, again, looks differently, talks differently, dresses differently, or grew up differently, frankly, that doesn't mean shit, you know, because, again, it costs the same to be a good person and an understanding one as it does to be an asshole or someone that just doesn't care, that is too self-enveloped to want to embrace other cultures and identities, you know, because the world doesn't operate like that. It's not like the whole world operates where everyone is speaking the same language, has the same schedule, looks the same. You know, that's probably what purgatory looks like. I don't know. But it's important to embrace it. And if you feel uncomfortable maybe asking someone about their culture and all that, it's better to try and learn and grow in your understanding than to, you know, just be naive and or closed off to want to experience other cultures and identities, and, you know, and just grows to, and it'll allow you to grow in your empathy as well. A lot of people spend years trying to figure out where they belong. But maybe belonging is not about fully fitting into one box. Maybe it's about learning how all your experiences shaped who you are. Your culture, your upbringing, your environment, your struggles, your family, your experiences, all of it matters. And the question that I pose to my audience today is, what's something from your culture or upbringing that will always be part of who you are? Again, what's something from your culture or upbringing that will always be part of who you are? Let me know in the comments. Shoot us a message or just take some time to reflect on it. And thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. And if you like this episode, please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow across YouTube and your favorite social media platform. And while you're at it, follow us on Instagram at Middle of the Fence if you don't already. And let me know who you're rooting for, because you guys obviously know who your boy's rooting for. Soy argentino, ese sentimiento no puede parar. Ole, ole, ole. All right, let me stop. Thank you guys, and as always, no matter what side of the fence you grew up on, we're all more alike than we think. My name is Andre Spruell. Catch you guys next time. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. And if you like this episode, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe here on YouTube, and hit the little notification bell so you could be the first to be notified when the latest episode drops. Also, be sure to check us out on your favorite podcast streaming platform as well, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And again, No matter what side of the fence you grew up on, we're all more alike than we think.